Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's BizLibrary webinar, Linking Employee Retention to Learning and Development. We have a great session filled with all sorts of representatives from our partner companies. But first, we'd love to know where you're watching from and what you are hoping to learn today. So if you want to pop open the attendee chat, you should be able to find that along the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And just let us know where you're watching from, what you're hoping to learn today. We'll also be collecting questions in the chat throughout the next hour to facilitate a live Q&A towards the end of our discussion. While you are doing that, we'll go ahead and get started with a few housekeeping notes. Your media player and slide window should already be open, but if you encounter any issues, sometimes a simple refresh of your browser is all you need. If you're still having trouble, please send a message through the Q&A so that we do not distract others. Alternatively, you can click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can click on the Q&A icon at the bottom to submit your questions or use that attendee chat. Q&A is private between you and us, the presenters, and group chat is open to all attendees. Feel free to share questions throughout the webinar today, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A with our presenters. Also, we do have a free resource in our resources widget, so be sure to check that out today, as well as all of our upcoming webinars off to the side there. And then lastly, today's webinar is approved for SHRM and HRCI credit, and you'll be able to download a completion certificate at the end of the webinar by clicking the certificate icon at the bottom of the page. Looks like we've got all sorts of attendees today filling in the chat. Just calling some people out here. We've got Texas, New York, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, Florida. Lisa wanting, she's a talent and culture manager from Wilmington, North Carolina. Excited for this discussion here from Washington, D.C. Awesome. Well, thank you all for filling in the chat. We'd love to know what you're hoping to learn today. So let us know. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. At BizLibrary, we're on a mission to elevate employees' skills and create better places to work, and do our part to build a more compassionate and competent future. We lean into these goals every day by supporting organizations' learning and development needs through our innovative platforms, best-in-class content, and unrivaled strategic support. With L&D powered by BizLibrary, employees are equipped with the skills they need for the job today and ready to take on new challenges tomorrow. So without further ado, I would like to spend some time introducing our speakers for today. I'm Caroline Miller, Marketing Events Lead at BizLibrary, and I will be monitoring your discussion today. Speaking, we have Jake Slade, Client Success Manager at BizLibrary. Meredith Haberfeld, founder and CEO of ThinkHuman. ThinkHuman is a leadership development organization that supports HR and L&D leaders with implementing community-centered and experiential-based leadership programs for leaders at all levels that are built to support a culture of belonging. The leadership training programs they offer, Leader Lab, Mini Lab, and Grow Lab, are designed to create mindset shifts and behavioral change over time that sticks with a heart-centered approach. Next, we have Jared Andress, Leader and Learning and Development Advisor at Critical Mass. Critical Mass is a full-service digital experience design agency with a relentless focus on the customer. They design experiences for brands they love. And last but certainly not least, we have Sam Klamarczyk, Corporate Facilitator at the Predictive Index. The Predictive Index offers talent optimization software, workshops, and expert consulting for hiring and talent strategy with teams. So we are excited to dive in with all of our presenters today. We're going to go ahead and get started here with an opening question. What has interested our panelists in the topic of employee retention, and specifically using L&D to aid with employee retention? Meredith, I'd love to direct this question to you first and hear your thoughts, and we'll just kind of pop around with our other speakers.
Sounds good. So I think first, just the data. I mean, research shows that 93% of employees would stay longer at a company that invests in their career growth. That comes from the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Trends report. And I mean, the data goes on, right? 1 in 5 people quit during their first year, and 69% are more likely to stay for at least 3 years with a good onboarding experience. So that's number one. The second big driver for me is the current conditions right now. Companies are, I mean, the economy is uncertain. Companies are in hiring slowdowns and freezes, and now more than ever, there's a tension on L&D. And because of restructures in many orgs, the people in them, in many cases, are our highest performers that we don't want to lose. So creating opportunities to grow people and make sure those people are staying. And then lastly, and this is maybe personally the biggest driver for me, is that the average person spends 90,000 hours at work over our lifetime. So for anything that we're going to spend our lifetime at, let's have it be good and helping us grow as human beings.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
For me, really, I'm a true believer that, and this kind of goes off the last point that Meredith made, I think that every person should have a job that they absolutely love and are incredibly passionate about. And a huge part of staying with an organization long term, you know, the organization driving retention, is that their employees feel connected to the job, connected to the company's mission, and really the culture as well. So being here able to, you know, talk about ways that I work with clients to drive that, and ways that I think we can really drive retention through some different learning and development strategies is so exciting to me. And really I'm looking forward to our presentation today.
Nice. Hey folks, I'll jump in here. Thank you so much for having me and for included Predictive Index in this. I think what excites me about this conversation is I'm fairly new to the corporate side of careers here. I have an education, previous career in education and outdoor education. So spent a lot of time building community in classrooms, building community with groups who are outside of our norm. And I think a lot of what I've learned is that this community is core to our success, to our teams, to our culture. And it's also what's missing most in this new world of work. The way that we work remotely, hybrid, seeing people in office every once in a while, that community piece is missing. And so what I've loved about being able to deliver L&D workshops and kind of help clients see this opportunity to get community back into their teams, back into their manager relationships, and turn that culture around, that's been really exciting to me. I've gotten to bring a lot of that experience from a previous career and see it have a real impact here with some of our clients at the Predictive Index. So for me, I think a lot about the impact that this kind of stuff can have on community, right? The feeling of actually going to work and feeling like you have a community to go back to. Meredith, I love what you said about how much time we spend at work. The mission at Predictive Index is better work, better world, right? And in all of our workshops, we talk about, you know, if you're going to work unhappy, if you're going to work burnt out, if you're going to work feeling like this job isn't the right fit, then how are you leaving that job, right? Even if you're going to work and it's logging into your laptop, when you close it, are you feeling that burnout? Are you feeling that energy drain? And if we're really living up to better work, better world, we're making sure that people leave work, log off for the day, feeling like they can go be better parents, they can go be better soccer coaches, they can go be better neighbors, better people to run into at the grocery store, right? And so when I talk about community as core, that's what I think this is all about, right? Yes, we want to retain our employees, but we want them to feel fulfilled. We want them to feel emotionally invested. And so that's what really gets me excited about this conversation.
Hallelujah.
Great. Yeah, I would certainly echo everything that's been said so far in terms of employee experience. As you know, I think I might be the only one here who's part of an internal L&D team for an organization, but as such, we're always focused on metrics around employee engagement, employee experience, and of course, retention. I did pull a number, it's from SHRM, and because I know we are going to be speaking about some of the ROI associated with training initiatives later on. And we know that based on their research, direct replacement costs can actually be as high as 50 to 60% of an employee's annual salary. And then if you zoom out and get into the total costs associated with turnover, so, talent acquisition, loss of productivity, also getting somebody trained up to the point where they're, successful in their role, you're starting to get into numbers like 90% to up to 200% of an annual salary for turnover. So those numbers are significant. And if you want to demonstrate an ROI on your training programs, that can certainly be a good place to start.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You all came so prepared with your statistics, and I cannot believe 90,000 hours. That is absolutely crazy that we spend at work. But thank you so much for sharing. Next, we just kind of want to dive into this whole topic of retaining employees. I'd love to kind of get all of your perspectives on perhaps why people are leaving organizations. So I think we touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to dive a little bit more into that. So Jake, would you be willing to kick us off on that one?
I would love to. In doing some research and just kind of thinking back to some of the clients that I've worked with about, the feedback that they hear, a very common answer for why people are leaving is poor leadership. Not necessarily that leader is bad at their job, but maybe they're not managing in the right way that employee needs. That's one place that L&D can tie in, just making sure that leaders know how to work with each individual on their team, even going up the employee matrix, managing up, managing down, making sure that the relationships are solid. Beyond that, lack of learning and in tune with that is a lack of growth opportunities can play into feeling stuck, feeling burnt out or bored in a role when you don't see kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the 90,000 hours even. And really all of that can tie into poor company culture. The one interesting data point that I saw, it came out about a year ago. So obviously we're in a little bit of a different time now, but in 2021, 57, almost 60% of employees that quit basically felt disrespected at work. And equally, 60% of those people also felt that they didn't have those opportunities to advance. So it kind of all ties together in the end, and there's no silver bullet to what is making people leave. Those are kind of the things that typically stick out to me, though.
I'll jump in right on the heels of that. I mean, I think you captured a lot of it, that people feel like they need that opportunity to develop, so much so that the stat I saw from Pew Research is that inadequate career development is the number 2 reason people leave, only second to comp issues. So number 2 reason is pretty compelling. I'd also add to the list employee burnout. Supposedly, according to Kronos, 50% of annual turnover these days is from burnout. And a couple people have mentioned the cascading benefit of manager development, but I'll just point our attention back there that although burnout is pervasive right now and it is influenced by a lot of underlying societal issues that have kind of gained speed over the last few years, when you have a manager that's really good at a few key things like prioritizing and sequencing work and capacity planning. It seems like pretty basic skill. It's not that sexy, but actually understanding like, okay, there's a waterfall of things to do, but how do I make sure to capacity plan so that people inside this team can feel successful and can feel like they are moving through things at a pace that is humane. So that's one part of burnout. And then the other that's already been spoken about is that people feel known, included, that whether they are in a marginalized group or they're not actually either way that people feel. I would say the stretch is bigger for most managers when someone is in a marginalized group, because they have to really get past all their own kind of commonality biases and understand, like, how do I have to flex so this person can bring out the best in themselves? But those two things, being able to really have the EQ skills and the capacity planning and sequencing skills, make a huge difference in the burnout equation.
I love it. I love it. I saw Asia in the chat says people feel forgotten. I mean, we should have known this would have happened, right? When we all went remote, we all went into our own little corners. We should have known that people stopped feeling heard, valued, that they would have started to feel forgotten, right? But what we've seen happen now is that companies don't necessarily have a talent strategy. I love what you said, their capacity planning, Meredith. I love that frame, right? People and companies don't have a talent strategy the same way they do business strategies, right? We know what we want to accomplish. We know the results that we have to hit, but so often we forget about the people in the middle, the people who are doing the work, right? And so at Predictive Index, we see that there's 4 forces of disengagement. It's really, all of the things that we've talked about boils down to 4 things. It's fit to the job. Do they feel like they're a good fit? Are they getting burnt out by the job? Is the job requiring too much for them behaviorally? Are they a good fit with their manager? Do they have a good relationship with their manager? Do they have clear expectations? Is that manager leading them the way that they want to be led, managed, and coached? Are they a good fit on their team? Do they see their value on the team? Does the team see the value in them? And then culture, right? Is the culture healthy? Is the culture thriving? Is it supportive of everyone and their growth? So it's really, people leave because I hate my job, I hate my manager, I hate my team, I hate my culture, right? If we start to think of those as opposites, they can start to be the reasons why people stay, right? If we work towards having people respond in a way of, I love my job, I love my manager, I love my team, I love this culture, that'll be the reason they stay. We want people emotionally invested, not just financially invested. I've seen a lot of research recently about how millennials and Gen Zers are willing to do the hopping. They're willing to bounce around because they just see it as an opportunity to learn, make some money, move along in their career, climb up the ladder, right? And some of us are still thinking of the way that it was before, where we want that community, right?
Thanks for that summary, Sam. Yeah, I think that, like, from our perspective, one of the projects that I lead internally is the leadership development specifically, and these are all sort of things that we're trying to address through that program. For example, we recently rolled out a training on how to hold effective one-on-ones because we were getting certain feedback that people were unclear as to how they might progress in their career, like what kinds of stretch goals do they need to be setting, what kinds of training might they need to take, or what kind of projects do they need to get on to learn the skills that they need to close those gaps and get to that next level. Other hot topics right now, stress management, of course, which has been alluded to. There's, I think, sort of an endemic culture of burnout across every industry. It's not unique to any one industry. And similarly, things like being able to have difficult conversations, having those clear career paths, but also like empowering the managers to be able to let someone know that maybe they're not ready for that next step, but also what they need to do in order to get there. So those are all things that I've got my eye on right now.
Jared, I just want to +1 on the one-on-ones, like supporting managers to use their one-on-ones in a way that can open a lot of doors. Like, we all know one-on-ones can be super transactional business updates. What's happening with this? What's happening with that? And then you get to the end of the one-on-one and you miss this humongous opportunity that really can be like strategic and structured to do all the things that I saw in the chat that aren't happening, like people feeling valued, appreciated, like they're a human, like there's community and connection, like things are fair. When a manager has some training and a structure around how to use their one-on-ones that way, it's not like extra time for them. It's just like, okay, how do I use my one-on-one to create that human connection, use unblock whatever they need unblocked, support their development and growth, and then leave them feeling like a human that is connected to me and that I see them and that they belong here. And so I just really think that cascading benefit of, yes, employee development and training programs to have people stay, but you get kind of like this win-win-win when you invest in the managers and then get them investing in the people.
Absolutely. I think that what we see a lot, again, across industries, is that people who are fantastic individual contributors get promoted into a management role. But if they aren't necessarily given the skills that they need to manage a team, then they're not being set up for success in that role. And likewise, neither is their team. So I do think that giving at least some sort of baseline leadership development training is critical.
I know I'm doing a lot of talking, so forgive me, but I'm just going to add one more thing on the heels of that, which is just that oftentimes those of us in the L&D function can keep our attention focused on L&D when they walk out of the room. What are the things, the systemic supports that are going to reinforce the behaviors that we just trained on or undermine the behaviors that we just trained on? And so having a few tools like leadership expectations, so managers know before they go into training, these are the things that are expected behaviors. And then having systemic supports, whether it's in a 360, the culture survey and a manager section, or in the perf process, but having systemic feedback loops so that person knows, like, am I doing these things or not? Because oftentimes we can then just like shout into the wind with some beautiful training that doesn't have the systemic organizational processes that support those behaviors.
Yeah, and Caroline, I know we'll talk about tools, I'm sure, at some point specifically, but thinking about setting up managers to open up those feedback loops too, right? PI uses management strategy guides, and they're based off of someone's results when they take the Predictive Index's behavioral assessment. So then right away, when a manager and a direct report are starting their relationship in the onboarding program, one of the first conversations they can have is, hey, direct report, how can I manage you best? How can I manage you the way that you want to be managed, led, coached? How can I give you feedback? How do you want this advice? How do you want me to help you manage projects, right? Instead of making these assumptions and expecting that the direct report is going to tell us those things. Let's look at the behavioral data. Let's look at this people data, and let's start off on the right foot. So PI has a lot of wonderful tools to make sure that that happens.
That's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I think this next question that we plan to hit on, we've kind of already hit on, but I just want to make sure before I skip over it that nobody has anything else to add. So I know that not all of you are people managers, so perhaps you can, take this even as personally what makes you stay. But are there any lessons that you all have learned in how to retain good, knowledgeable people that you would like to share that perhaps we haven't touched on quite yet?
I think
Let someone else jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say for on my team, one of the things that we like to do is to just ask people what it is they'd like to be working on, what kind of things they'd like to develop. And, we're quite a small and pretty agile team, so that works well for us. I know certain organizations might have a more rigid structure. But for example, somebody that I work with had expressed interest in, I want to learn how to build websites, and I want to learn how to create these training assets. So with kind of the bare minimum of supervision, I was like, yeah, run with that. Let's see what you can do. Come with the ideas and show me what you can create for us. And so far it's been very successful, and her engagement I've watched it go way up since we started doing that. And also we have all these great tools and templates and websites that she's created for us. So it's really been a win-win.
I love that. I will add, just kind of in my personal experiences, and we've already touched on this a little bit, but seeing positive outcomes for myself, and this is, I would think applies to many individual contributors, seeing positive outcomes that I can attack, very similar to what Jared mentioned. If there's something that I want to take on, that I think could benefit the team or the department, BizLibrary provides those opportunities. And it's like, why would I want to leave if I'm given the opportunity to accomplish everything that I want to accomplish? So that's kind of my personal take on why I think a lot of people do decide to stay. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I know Jared's an internal, HR leader, but for us, what I'm seeing is for our clients, when they actually participate in workshops that bring self-awareness, right? When we're talking about someone's unique strengths, their caution areas, coaching tips for that person, and we're having open discussions about them and their team fit, them and their role, right? We're building this self-awareness conversation that's going to give them such a gift. And so I know workshops, right? When you see an L&D event on the calendar, a team building event on the calendar, I run a lot of internal team building opportunities for our staff at PI, our pioneers. And I know the stigma that goes along with seeing a team building event. Oh, we're going to have to do trust falls. We're going to have to, throw these throwables. We're going to have to open up, right? I get that. But what happens after a team building event is better self-awareness, better awareness of everyone else, and better awareness of how my strengths, my behaviors are going to impact them, right? And so the workshops that we've been delivering, that I'm seeing PI partners deliver, that I'm seeing our clients deliver for their internal teams, those are what's creating some of that really strong retention, because it's leading to that community, right? Again,
Yes.
Back to community is core.
Totally. And there's skill training, and then there's human development. And that kind of development where people are growing as individuals. We say that there are, that business goals, the business gets to keep, but development goals, the person gets to keep wherever they go. And those are yours to take with you. And growing in the ways that you just described not only enhance us as human beings, create the connectivity within the organization or the connection, but also those things that were in the chat before, like people leave because they don't feel valued, appreciated. It doesn't feel like they are treated as a human being, or they don't have connection. That kind of EQ building, connective self-awareness, self-regulation, human development gives all the humans in the organization enhanced skills to create that not only for themselves, but with one another.
Absolutely. I would even expand on that a little bit. One thing that we know from our feedback from the leadership development program that's quite popular is the fact that it's cohort based. So they get to, our organization is distributed across something like 8 or 9 different office locations in different cities, a number of different disciplines that don't always work together very closely. And one of the things that people really like every single time is the opportunity to meet and network and collaborate with other leaders in the organization. And in addition to that, we actually have most of our facilitators are internal people as well. So they get twice, the added benefit of getting the facilitation experience, and then also meeting everyone, getting to connect, and to your point, Meredith and Sam, building that community.
Awesome. I love it. Those are all great ways to engage people, make them stay. So I love all of those. I'm glad that we didn't skip over that. We had a really engaged audience also. With just some things that I'd love to call out from the chat. But team building activities or events often strengthen inclusion, people work for people, and people leave people. It's all about fostering a culture of safety and vulnerability. And then also identifying early on and finding ways to support them through onboarding are all great ways to get people to stay as well. So awesome there. I would love to really just now kind of shift into, we've spent the first 30 minutes here essentially on why people stay and why people leave, but now kind of linking that all back to learning and development. So why are learning and development programs so important to employee retention? I think that it kind of all goes hand in hand with things that we've discussed thus far. But are there any things that you would mention that really fosters that relationship and keeps people staying?
people feel valued, invested in, communication gets better so the organization feels better. You've created a positive environment. Growing is right at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we're satisfying a fundamental human need. And I'll sprinkle on top that companies are putting a lot of time and attention into representation around diversity. And when they're not putting the time and intention into creating an inclusive environment, and there's a systemic and policy part of that too, but creating an environment for managers where managers know how to lead in an inclusive way.
I think two things come to mind here for me, just going back to that self-awareness piece. There was a study in that self-awareness is what we get from these workshops of doing it with other people. There's a study by Tasha Eurich from the Harvard Business Review, and it said that 95% of people think they are self-aware. 95% of people think they're self-aware. 15% actually are. It's staggering, right? So that means that 85% of the people that we work with, we interact with day to day, 15% of people are actually self-aware. And so the first step in that is recognizing the gap to truly understanding all of the ways that you might impact other people, and starting there. I think the other thing that I love, and somewhat Eric Coriel talks about this a lot. He talks about shared fate, and that the more time that we spend together talking about our mission, our shared values, our shared experiences, the things that we're going through together, the more face time that we have with someone, the more shared investment we have in not only our mission, but their growth and their development and their success, right? So this idea of shared fate that comes from any L&D program, again, back to that cohort, right? That whole idea of going through a cohort, going through an experience with someone else, it's gonna build that shared fate amongst that team, and that's gonna help the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've really seen over the past couple of years, L&D sort of gain the spotlight, which has been nice as someone who's spent my career in it. But, it's really been identified by business leaders outside of L&D as a competitive advantage, and rightfully so. We know that upskilling employees is good for the employer. The staff they need to be able to keep up with the fast pace of change right now. So whether that's technology innovations, competition, economic pressures, all kinds of factors like that. We also know that upskilling can be a great way to address talent gaps. So it reduces the need to go to market and seek new talent. And with the pace of change kind of continuing to accelerate and no sign of slowing down, I think that organizations that recognize that providing learning and development opportunities for their staff through various ways, that can be professional development funding, opportunities to go to conferences, internal development programs, mentorship programs, or any combination of those, really do set themselves up for a competitive advantage by having people who are able to respond to the changing market, and also reducing their costs in turnover.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'll add that, when a learning and development program is done right, all of the training, no matter what medium it's coming in, is timely. It's relevant to each individual, and obviously that's a huge challenge, being able to individualize training across an entire organization. But it just adds so much more value to each employee's individual experience, knowing that, my company truly does care about my training, my upskilling, and making sure that not only can I complete my job now, but complete my job in a year that will probably require more skills.
That's great. Just as a reminder, feel free to share in your questions. We're getting quite a few that are great, and we'll save those till the end. I promise I'll save time. But one that we did get that really pertains to exactly what we're talking about was somebody here mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Could you just repeat that comment, whoever that was, on our speaker panel here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know everybody's sitting in front of a computer. You can Google Maslow's hierarchy, and right at the top is actualization, like growing as a human being. So down at the bottom, we have those basic needs like safety and climbing up, psychological safety, and then we've got belonging. So L&D hits on that one too. But up at the pinnacle is how are we really actualizing as a human? And it makes me think, just a moment ago, I got moved thinking about a learning experience that I had so long ago. It was my second job out of college, and an executive at the company that I was at took a risk and was like, hey, there's this kind of crazy transformational leadership development program. You might want to try, check it out. And I was like, all right, like, let me see what that thing is. And the people who had me do that thing, or not had me do it, but like who encouraged me to take a leap and try growing in a way that was about me as a human being, I am so forever grateful. Like, they loom large in my life. Like, not only do I keep growing and thinking back to that, but those human beings are like shoulders that I stand on. So I think sometimes I can lose track of how emotionally connected learning can be. Like, we can go really far in our life and look back and be like, wow, there were like these pivotal moments that were learning jumps for us that changed everything. I certainly can see that in my life.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I would kind of like to jump into, I guess, the nitty gritty of the conversation and what you all use, and, perhaps those of you that are client facing, things that you have encouraged your clients to focus on or worked with them on, or what you do in your own organizations. But what kind of tools and trainings do you use for these learning and development programs that make them successful in retaining employees? And I'll throw this one to Jake first.
Yeah. So obviously, at BizLibrary, we do provide the platforms and kind of the places where online learning can happen. So, we do recommend that all of our clients take a hybrid approach to learning. If at all possible, do in-person training when you can. But what about the times between the in-person cohorts, those different sessions? So what we work with our clients on when it comes to upskilling specifically, is our BizSkills tool that Caroline had alluded to at the beginning. What this tool does is really align content to each individual's roles based on the skills that they need to succeed. So it really comes down to, like I had said, making sure that the training is timely. And then the beauty of that is that you can still come together and talk through in person those specific skills, work on practice activities or different scenarios. Beyond that, really, there's so many different routes that I could talk through, but I did want to just mention when it comes to kind of onboarding and the way that can be used as a training tool to initiate community and culture right off the bat. BizLibrary's onboarding experience is a perfect example. Long story short, week-long, very immersive experience. You're paired up with other new hires, doesn't matter what roles you're in. And it's a perfect opportunity to dive deep into the values and mission of BizLibrary, as well as each individual department, so that you know kind of what is driving each individual in those different areas, how you can use them as a resource in the future, which is often overlooked when you're just thrown at your desk on day one and your manager tells you what your job is going to be. So, yeah, like I said, there's so many other things that I could talk about, and happy to connect offline with anybody that's interested on those.
I love it. Predictive Index is a similar, where it's a talent optimization company, right? And so earlier I talked about, companies have the business strategy, and then they are looking for those business results, right? And whether that's end of each quarter or end of the year. And the people are the folks who actually do that work, right? And so talent optimization is all about connecting the talent strategy to that business strategy, right? And so we have 4 modules that all have L&D programs associated with it, that we have PI partners that are running these globally right now. And so that's Hire, which is all about helping teams hire well, getting the right person in the right role at the right time. It's going to be a good behavioral fit. It's not going to burn them out. And that hire is going to be based on their own behavioral drives that they get from their behavioral assessment. Susan, I see your question here in the chat about Gallup. I love Gallup. In fact, my whole leadership facilitator journey started using Gallup and StrengthsQuest. But what I found with PI is that the behavioral assessment goes so much deeper and gets much more specific on those 4 behavioral drives. The top 5 strengths from Gallup are fantastic. But what we learned from using the behavioral assessment is we can use it in hire, make sure that folks are actually a good fit for the role. Not do they just impress us in the interview, not do they have a great resume, but it's those plus, are they a good fit for the role behaviorally, right? We can do the same for teams, make sure that folks are a good fit for their team, that they're balancing out the strategy, that they're helping folks accomplish what they need to. We can use that behavioral people data and Inspire, make sure that we're connecting those managers and direct reports in a way that's going to set up that direct report well to succeed in the job, not only in their onboarding process, but after that. And then we also have Diagnose. It's an employee experience survey. It's looking at the whole culture of the company, and Diagnose measures across those 4 modules. How are we taking care of our people? How are we helping people get into the right roles? How are we empowering our teams to lead open and honest conversations about how they're getting to their strategy? And so when we fight those 4 forces of disengagement, right, that's talent optimization. And Predictive Index has that full suite of tools with L&D workshops that can be delivered by PI partners globally. So it's a huge, huge effort by a lot of people, but it's been fantastic.
I can maybe go next. We, in terms of tools, we could go all day, I think, on that. But maybe what I'll do instead is break down some of the pillars that we've used to approach some of these in our organization. So our L&D function is split up into 3 sort of pillars, is what we call them. So the first is for our junior talent, and that's a program called Trailhead, where their whole catchphrase thing is like inexperience is encouraged. So they want to get people in the door, and we'll show them kind of how the advertising industry works, how they can be successful there. And that's for people who are either brand new to the industry, so whether they're straight out of school or maybe a career changer. The second pillar, we're calling it craft and skill, and I like that name. And the idea is that is where we try and help people to excel in their career where they're at. So I saw that there was a comment in the chat from Rebecca asking, how do you overcome company leaders wanting to train mid-management only on procedural tasks? And I think this might be somewhat related there. So what we try to do is take almost a consultative approach. So if, for example, a discipline reaches out to our team and says like, hey, we need some training for all of our project managers, then we would meet with them specifically, dig into a bit of what exactly they're looking for, and then either work with them to develop some training or see if we're going to bring in an outside vendor perhaps, or if they already have something built, where can we help? So recently we had a situation just like that, and it turned out all they needed from us was they wanted us to build them a handout that people could take away from the training to refer back to afterwards. So some of the consulting engagements are easier than others. That one was an easy one. And the final pillar is the leadership development, which is the one that I lead. And there we have it broken down into about 4 different levels based on kind of seniority and, or I shouldn't say seniority, but more experience with people leadership specifically, with different topics targeted to each level along that path. So those are some of the tools, I guess, that we use internally.
It's my turn. Do we want to stay with this question? Should I answer this one too, Caroline?
If you want to, feel free to chime in. If not, we can move on.
Great. So I think the tool that feels most like high leverage to talk about right now is an approach we take to L&D strategy called IPSM. And it is especially useful right now in this world of like all eyes on L&D and grow the people, but limited budgets. So do more with less. So IPSM is like a filter to take the learning priorities through to be able to maximize, like, how do we not just like, do the low cost thing that doesn't produce a result, or, you know, try to do a million things and not be able to afford it. So IPSM is impact. What are the behavioral impacts? Oh, good. I see that Asia put a guide into the chat, so you can follow along there or read about it, because that's a good take home. But impact is what does the business need, and what are the behaviors that are going to drive that change in the business? So you're really clear from the start about what's that business impact and what are the behaviors. Second is potency. What are those 20% of the behaviors that are going to drive 80% of the impact? So you're not having to train on 12 different things, but just that 20% that's going to make the biggest difference. Then systems. What are the systemic things in the organization? We talked about this a little bit before, that either undermine the training that you did or enforce it. Because once they're out of the training room, one of those two things is happening. And then lastly, measurement. How are you measuring the behavior change and not having that be an afterthought, but starting there? What's the behavior we're trying to drive, and how are we going to measure it?
Awesome. I love hearing about all of these experiences. Yes, great, Sam. A round of applause for everybody. But love hearing these experiences either with inside your organization or what you all do, you know, with your clients as well. So thank you so much for sharing. This next question, Jared kind of alluded to earlier, so I'm going to kick it to him first. But with organizations tightening their budgets, it's important to be able to prove the ROI of your programs. Can you all share how you measure the ROI of your learning and development programs, perhaps as they pertain, because I know that this could be a whole nother webinar, but perhaps as they pertain to employee retention specifically?
For sure, thank you. So I know that this is something that I've certainly struggled with in the past, and I think that a lot of L&D and HR leaders can struggle with, because it can be somewhat difficult to quantify an ROI on certain L&D initiatives. But what the sort of solution that I've come to is that with a little bit of effort, you actually can. And chances are, depending on what your access to the data that you have in your organization is, you might already have all the information you need. So regarding employee retention, let's say that over the last couple of quarters, your company has been able to reduce their turnover by 50%. If you look at your turnover data, you can actually get the average compensation for the people who have left. And if you want to get more detailed, you can break that down by level as well, because, you know, there might be a big breadth of salaries there. Now, going back to that number that I shared before, we know that it can cost up to 90 to 200% of a person's annual salary to replace them. So knowing all of that, you can actually come to a rough number of what your turnover is costing the organization per quarter or per year. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. It's not quite that easy. As much as L&D would love to take complete credit for a 50% reduction in turnover, we know that we can't do that. So when you're looking at numbers like turnover, you need to, of course, factor in other things that make people stay. So, you know, overall employee experience, room for growth and development, total compensation, what their day-to-day is like, what their workload is like. So, but what you can do from the L&D perspective is you can sort of take a guess at what the L&D may have contributed to that reduction. So let's say you can quantify that as maybe 30% or 20% of that 50% reduction in turnover. You can do the math there and actually land on a number for your ROI. So for anybody who isn't familiar with ROI calculations, typically you would take the net benefit, so whatever the number you landed on for that 30% of the 50% in this example, and then you would divide it by whatever your training cost, and then turn that into a percentage. So that's kind of my quick and dirty how you can show an ROI on something like this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jared. That was a great response. Anybody else have anything to mention on how to prove ROI? I know that's a big thing that we focus on at BizLibrary as well.
Yeah, couple of things that I think about is, one, Predictive Index has a turnover calculator. So I encourage everyone to go check that out. I can drop a link in the chat here. So if you're curious of just plugging in some numbers, you can do that and actually try and go calculate that. All of the things that Jared spoke about there of like why this costs so much, I'm seeing really similar numbers of why this is burning so much money. But we refer to this as a people tax. We're paying a tax on losing all of these great employees. We're paying for this up front. And so it's worth considering, right? Like, why are people unhappy? Why are people leaving this position? Why are people not feeling like they're great fits for this role? Why is this onboarding process not working out? All of those things are costing us money, right? And people are willing to leave after not even 3 months. When they get hired for a position, they're still making that decision of whether or not they're going to stay in those first 30, 60, 90 days, right? And so this process for us to actually fight that people tax starts on day one. And that shift in perspective is what's going to end up kind of preventing all of this people tax, and it's going to help save that turnover. But I'll drop the turnover calculator in the chat here, and if folks want to check it out, I encourage you.
I have maybe potentially a little bit of a contentious point of view on ROI, which is, I think it lives in two categories for me. Number one, from like the business-minded part of me, we know that 66% of L&D initiatives are not connected to business strategy, according to business leaders. That's from Brandon Hill's research, okay? So 66% is a big number. That's a whole lot of L&D programs that the leaders of the organizations are not seeing connected to business strategy. Kind of speaks for itself in terms of ROI. If you're doing things that are not helping the business strategy move forward toward vision and goals, that speaks for itself. The more contentious part of my view is that a lot of the justification for investing in humans is it increases, and all reasonable things, but it increases employee loyalty, it increases employee engagement, it increases retention, all of which is true. But that kind of work, in my view, should not be tied to ROI. That's like how much blood can we squeeze from a stone by making the stone feel good, instead of we want to create an environment that feels great for people to be in. And inside that environment, people are focused on doing their best work that are in line with the business strategy. So for me, there's two very different worlds. One is about aligning L&D to the business strategy, and the other is about creating an environment where humans can be at their best. And that's not about the ROI, even though there are ROI impacts.
Spot on, Meredith.
Awesome. Anything you wanted to add in there, Jake? I think you were speaking up earlier.
Yeah, they didn't really cover it. I think what Meredith was just talking about, it was very interesting, because a lot of clients that I work with that are putting together the programs that do not have direct impacts on business outcomes, they come to me and they ask, what metrics can we use to tie this directly to ROI? And those are some of the most difficult conversations and most difficult solutions to come up with, because there isn't that direct link. When we are implementing clients, that is what we focus on, is what business outcomes and what business challenges can we change with certain training programs, and that's what we focus on first. So I think that was just a very interesting point, Meredith. I love that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Meredith, one thing in the chat from Amy, can you please repeat the study you referenced about the 66%?
Yep, I'm just dropping it in there. I'll see if I can find the link for you too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that we're running really close to time, and I do want to get to the few Q&A questions that we had. So I'm going to kind of wrap up this webinar with a combination of our last two questions that we had prepared from our panelists. But in terms of getting started, what is like one, maybe two takeaways our panelists could give with things to keep in mind or best practices to look out for on this initiative? I would kind of love to leave us with some key takeaways here, and then we'll hop into our few questions. Whoever wants to go first, you can take it away.
I have a quick answer. I always recommend starting with the end in mind. I think Meredith had mentioned it earlier, thinking about what behaviors we're trying to change, and kind of working backwards from there. Same goes for ROI calculations, or the strategy around the program itself. If you already know what the end goal is and what behaviors we're expecting to see different, it almost enlightens the path of how to get there.
Absolutely. I was going to say almost exactly that same thing. And I would add to that further to Meredith's previous point, some of these problems that you're going to see in an organization, it's not just throw some training at it and it'll go away. Often it's a much bigger, I don't want to call it a problem necessarily, but sometimes you need to engage with your other groups. So maybe HR needs to develop a policy that can help the managers actually implement a change, or perhaps the DE&I board, if you have one, should have some input. So I think that from an internal team's perspective, at least, getting that kind of cross-functional buy-in and understanding the need as in-depth as possible is definitely the best place to start.
I'm going to be boring because hallelujah to everything you just said. Start with alignment with the business and working cross-functionally to ensure we have the right behaviors and that the policies and systems are working in alignment with that, being clear what are those 20% of the behaviors that are going to make the biggest difference and how are we going to measure. It's like when you boil it down, there's a lot to do, but it's 4 pretty simple points.
Yeah. Have to have a talent strategy that aligns to the business strategy. If we don't do that, we're missing the people in the middle. We're not thinking about the people who are actually doing the work, and having L&D programs that are solving for those problems in the middle that happen between strategy and results is where we start to take care of this retention problem. We have to have a talent strategy, just like we have a finance strategy and a sales strategy and everything else. We have to have a talent strategy that takes care of our people, right? And so that's what talent optimization has all been about, is fighting those 4 forces of disengagement, right? We're making teams better, managers better fit for jobs, and improving our culture. If we're doing those 4 things, we're putting our best foot forward to make sure that we actually take care of that talent strategy.
And when you're talking about that strategy, it just brings up for me that we have, as L&D leaders, we live in between different customers or stakeholders, right? We have the business needs, and then we have the participants we're serving. And if we're not solving problems for both of them, we're failing. And just like any product that you put out into the market, there's got to be product market fit. You could have the most amazing product that if it's not solving somebody's problem, they're not going to utilize it. They're going to be like, that's great. Love that you have that. I don't need it. Thank you very much. So really also iterating inside of that alignment. Like, is it solving your problem? Is it solving your problem? And creating that product market fit before rolling something out across everyone.
I love it. Such great takeaways. We're down to just a couple of minutes. So our panelists just gave you kind of their takeaways and what they would recommend to all of you. I would love to see in the chat what everybody's takeaways were from this webinar. What's something that you could take away and implement? Tomorrow's Friday, maybe on Monday, but something that you could take and start right away. We'd love to hear those. While we get to your questions, I do want to throw one quick poll up on the screen. If you are interested in learning more about any of our companies that our panelists represented today, let us know. You can click one of these, all 3 of these, however many you would like to. But if you're interested in learning anything more about BizLibrary, ThinkHuman, or the Predictive Index, please let us know on the screen and we will have somebody reach out to you. Just a couple of questions that we did get from the audience, and I'll open these up to anybody who would like to answer. But first one is, how do you help top management understand that L&D is an investment they need to make? So essentially, how do you get leadership buy-in? A quick version.
I think that there's 2 paths to this. We used to be very dogmatic about you need to start at the top, because if it doesn't cascade from the top, so goes the leader, so goes the town, and you can train all these middle managers and then it's not lasting because they're not seeing that behavior modeled from above. I no longer have that dogmatic view. because what I've seen over the years is wherever you start, it begins to exert upward pressure, and that upward pressure starts to change minds. So I feel like all that's needed, it sounds a little hokey, is like one small place you can begin to pilot, because that one small place becomes a bright spot that then creates positive contagion. And then you can start to use those case studies to bring to leadership.
Awesome. Thank you, Meredith. Anything else from our panelists to add?
I would say one, in just a specific scenario, right? If you're struggling with team dysfunction and you're looking for an L&D program that's going to help solve that team dysfunction, and you're looking to gain that executive buy-in, Predictive Index has a tool called Design, one of those four that I talked about, that is going to make it so visual, the need for this L&D program, the need for a talent strategy around these teams, that it's going to be hard for executives to want to walk away from that, right? When we not only see our problems written out in graphs or tables or all of these spreadsheets, when we get to see it visually in more of a talent map, and we get to see where everyone is plotted, it becomes so clear why we're struggling and why we're not getting the results that we're looking for. So I would encourage folks to go check out Design. There's free demos that you can go through with partners, and that might be a great opportunity for y'all. Love it, John. Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know we're right at time. I do just want to bring up one last question if our panelists have another minute. But as an engagement manager, I partner with our DEI mission to create a culture of inclusivity. How important are DEI initiatives when it comes to employee retention? Great question. Anybody want to chime in here? And we'll leave it on this note.
I know that for us, the DE&I mission is one of our main important values as an organization. So for us, it's been quite easy to get buy-in for DE&I training. We have a lot of it. There's stuff that comes down mandatory for all staff, and then we also have it built into each level of our leadership development programs. So yeah, for us, it's super important. I think that I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I did see a number recently that was something like 80 or 95% of millennials and Gen Z listed DE&I strategy as being of critical importance to their choice in an employer. So yeah, I think that it's one of the most important things.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for attending. Like I mentioned in the poll on the screen, let us know who you're interested in learning more about if you are. And then as a reminder, today's webinar was approved for 1 hour of SHRM and HRCI credit. So you will want to download that certificate on your screen before leaving today. And if you're watching later on demand, be sure to do that as well. So thank you all so much. I think that this conversation was so beneficial to our panelists, to our audience. So I thank everyone for being here, and I hope you join us for more webinars in the future. Everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.
Ciao, everyone.